Thanks for having me, Tyler. Thanks to the entire team at Albert Lee for including us in the conversation. Really grateful to be here. I think we're going to have plenty of time for questions. At least I hope. Although I can be long-winded. You were supposed to get Tom, my co-CEO, but we did a little swap. He's in Taiwan working on some trade issues, and I'm here in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm happy to be in Omaha. I'm not in Taiwan, and to be with you today. I'm going to share a little bit kind of across different issue areas, from consumer opinions on organic to how the market has been doing the last year or two, what that might mean at the farm gate, and then looking forward into the future of some of what we see and some of the challenges that I know you all face, especially with imports. So we're gonna talk about imports quite a bit today. Before I do that, for those who don't know, OTA is the largest organic trade association in the U.S. We represent North American companies in the organic sector, and our mission is to grow and protect organic with a unifying voice. We are a very diverse membership. We're everything from produce to fiber to dietary supplements to dairy to grains and every node on the value chain. So input providers, farmers, aggregators, ingredient manufacturers, brands, and retailers. And I'm sure I'm forgetting lots of nonprofits as well who happen to be members. We've been around for 40 years doing this. Tom and I are relatively new leadership, and we are in what I would call kind of a renovation phase with the trade association, where we're really looking at how we operate differently and operate better to be more inclusive of a broader membership, as well as to evolve our communications in Washington, D.C. And we'll talk more about why that's important. But the real high level is USDA Organic is a public-private partnership, and we need to keep influencing and growing strong relationships in DC. So we'll talk more about that soon. But first, I want to start out with consumers, because they're the end user. They're the people we're all trying to delight and that you all are trying to feed, who are farmers in the audience. And we do annual consumer research with an independent third party. We don't put a finger on the scale with this. I'm going to share a couple of quick updates from research that has not yet been released, but happy to also share, anyone who's interested, older 2023 data after this as a follow-up. You can just reach out to someone, Denise or someone from Albert Lee, and I'm happy to get that research to you if you're interested. The real key takeaway I want to give to you all is that when we test organic across all other agriculture or food claims, non-GMO, regenerative claims, etc., organic by far is the most recognized and the most trusted claim in the marketplace. With American Heart Association, the trust kind of varies year to year. We're always right neck and neck with American Heart Association claims, but of course that's not an agricultural claim. That is the good news. I think some of the less good news is that consumers sometimes don't fully understand what the organic seal represents and how it might reflect the values that they're looking for in their food, including often consumer confusion about antibiotic-free, no GMOs, no hormones. They don't always associate that with organic. I'm not going to get that granular today, but I did want to just point out that, again, here, not only do consumers trust and recognize it, but I think what's important to all of us who are looking for a premium on organic production and manufacturing is that they show a willingness to pay. Consumers are more willing to pay for organic claims than they are for any other claim in the marketplace. The other thing I want to say is that we hear a lot about regenerative, and I didn't add a slide on this. I think we hear about that in the farm world, we hear about that in the business world, the LinkedIn world. Regenerative is a very hot topic. It is not on consumers' radar. In our research last year, and again this year, less than 10% of consumers feel they understand what it means. We put in a fake label, BioBalance, this year in our research, and more consumers claim to know what BioBalance means than regenerative. So we're sometimes talking in a bubble here. And the reason I point that out is not to badmouth regenerative. I think regenerative is an important movement of farmers trying to improve how they manage natural resources. For some farmers, it's an on-ramp to organic. For some farmers, it's integration with organic. For some farmers, it will remain independent. I grew up in a conventional farming family. We farmed what would be called conservation rotations in Nebraska in the 70s, corn, soy, alfalfa, and ran our cattle through the fields. We didn't know we were doing regenerative because it wasn't called that, but it would be called it today. So I don't say that to badmouth, but I say it to say that regenerative is a marketplace that has not mature or evolved yet, and it's going to take time. We know that from organic. It's taken 30, 40 years for us to grow, and we have eventually grown into what is going to be, after the end of this year, a more than $70 billion marketplace in the US alone, with expanding export markets. And that's one of the things that I should have said that OTA does. We are involved not only in advocating for organic in the US, but also developing export markets through trade partnerships with USDA. But back to the regenerative piece here before we jump into where the market is today. I think I just want to put out this note that while I encourage folks to improve their farming practices and work on conservation, crop rotations, and soil health, from a marketplace opportunity, organic is the marketplace opportunity. And while I know we've had some rough years for farms, we still are the most recognized opportunity for you to get rewarded for the practices, the investments you're making in stewarding your land and opting in to additional regulations and practices that, while they pay off in the long run, all this on soil health and natural resource conservation, sometimes are really challenging economically in the short run. So I'll get off my little soapbox on that. It's, again, not to say regenerative isn't an important movement and marketplace, but we are this mature marketplace, and there's no sign of anybody catching up anytime soon. Organic has slowed in its growth. You'll see that here in this chart. We were growing at double-digit sales, over 10% compound annual growth sales for a 10-year period. COVID changed some of that. It spiked our growth, as this chart shows. You can see the growth rates here: 12.5, 11.7, 9.3, drops a little bit. If we would have gone earlier to 2010 and before, it would have been 10% plus in all of those years. COVID spiked things. People were eating more at home, buying more organic. And there was a natural correction as COVID kind of became less of an issue. People went back out into the world and started eating at restaurants. And at that same time, inflationary pressures, labor pressures, challenges, in the marketplace overall that impacted conventional and organic, really hit organic hard because our price premiums were already higher. And so we did see some slowing of growth in 2021, especially correction in 2022, not so great in 2023, still, kind of not picking back up. We're just in the process of doing our 2024 research. We finished that up here at the end of December. We use all kinds of data that's independent as well as surveys with our members. And what I can say is that the way things are looking in 2024 is that organic is growing at more than double the rate of conventional grocery. Conventional grocery is growing about 1.5% growth. We're going to be, I think, around 4.5%. So still not a big bump, but we're starting to see some indication that things are improving. So performance did vary across category last year. I think you'll note, I apologize for the small print. My 57-year-old eyes struggle with this, so I'll just call out a couple things here. Produce only grew at 2.6%. It was quite a bit of a slowdown. Meat, poultry, and seafood grew at 6.7%. Dairy and eggs grew at 5.5%. Those remain really strong categories. If I showed you an even smaller chart that goes into subcategories, broilers, pork, and beef continue to grow, with especially broilers growing very fast. An increased interest from consumers in that category in particular, which should be good for grain growers. We'll get to maybe why that's not quite showing up in your pocketbooks in just a moment. So looking ahead, I am not a person that likes to make crystal ball predictions, But again, as I said, we're seeing some indication of organic continuing to grow at a much higher rate than conventional. What we don't know is that as inflation is decreasing and that's helping organic, we're not sure if that's going to hold. And tariffs are one of those key issues. I'm not going to go into that right now, slide on that later on, but we need to take a look at that. I think there's some pros and cons potentially for organic in Trump tariffs. It's not necessarily real binary that it's one or the other. As you all know better than me, farm gate prices have suffered dramatically over the last 12 to 18 months. And I believe that they're going to require, we need at least two actions to start to correct that, increasing market demand and really addressing imports in a more robust way. So on imports, listen, global trade is important. We want healthy global trade. We have legal requirements that require trade agreements, but there are concerns with organic imports today. This is true in produce, and it's true especially in organic feedstuffs and corn and soybeans in particular. There is a lot of concern with fraud. I think that concern is logical. And I would say that the concerns we at OTA have is that fraud would have an unfair competitive advantage for U.S. farmers and those trying to support U.S. farmers, whether it be input providers or those on the processing side who want to work with domestic producers. It's a reputation risk. It damages consumer trust in the organic seal when they hear about fraud, whether that fraud be domestic or foreign. And we certainly have heard plenty of domestic cases of fraud. And consumer confidence is essential for continuing to drive market demand and growth. We want to maintain that trust that we have and not see it eroded by headlines talking about massive organic fraud. And I think more importantly for me, as someone who grew up in a rural economy during the farm crisis in Nebraska in the 70s and 80s, is that one of the reasons I got into organic is I believe that organic is an opportunity for rural communities to capture more value. It started out as a movement that was about local and regional food systems and trying to keep more dollars in local and regional food systems. I think we need to be both a global market and we still need to focus on those local and regional. But even in that global aspect, I want to make sure that our domestic producers are capturing as much of that value as possible, because I know that it has a ripple effect and it translates into the rural community at large. Penn State did a study in 2014 looking at organic hotspots where there were concentrations of organic producers. And what it showed was that when there are concentrations of organic producers in the county or a region, it increases the overall economic well-being of all households in that county. The standard of living, the average household income increases, dependency on social service decreases. That was taking out all of the other white noise, just looking at organic versus conventional hotspots of producers and overall well-being. We are working with the Pennsylvania State Department of Agriculture, Penn State, and Emory University to redo that research from 2014, because it's true in 2014, might not be true today. And we hope to publish that in March or April of this coming year. But I'm a big believer that domestic organic is an opportunity to reinvigorate rural communities if we're doing it well and right. And I'm not here to say that we're always doing it well and right. But I think that's the challenge, the aspiration, and needs to be the mantra moving forward is do it right. So let's talk about imports for just a second. Well, more than a second. We're going to spend some time on imports here. You all know this, I believe, that a significant portion of organic imports are coming from regions that are questionable. Questionable in the sense of how well the certification is being monitored and managed, how well its laws are being enforced. Some of the data we're seeing on acreage in these countries doesn't make sense. Some of the volumes coming out of that acreage doesn't make sense unless they're getting miraculous soy and corn yields. And even if they have cheaper labor, and I started out walking soybeans as a kid, I still don't think that they have walkers that are able to get those kind of yields. And so because of that, there have been growing concerns that some of these imports may not be what they are claiming to be. So we have been working, the Organic Trade Association, with the Organic Farmers Association, with the National Organic Coalition, and with two farmers, Amy Brook from Nebraska, Nate Powpalm from Montana. I should have put a headline here of what the name of the bill is. The bill is called the Organic Import Verification Act. And we've all collectively been working on the Organic Import Verification Act. We see it not as a silver bullet that's going to solve all things when it comes to imports, but as essential. And what the Organic Import Verification Act would be is it would be a complement to SOE. SOE is strengthening organic enforcement. Strengthening organic enforcement being an initiative that was passed in the last Farm Bill to have the USDA National Organic Program have greater traceability, especially in its international imports, and have more of a risk-based approach to cracking down on gaps, challenges, and vulnerabilities in organic imports. This bill would be a complement to that by providing a compliance verification of import testing on feedstuffs. All organic feedstuffs imported into the US would require testing. More on that in just a second. The EU has this already, so we're catching up. And one of the reasons we need this is that in order for the USDA to prosecute what we perceive sometimes as fraud, we need to have good data, and testing is one important data point. Again, this is strategic. We're not going to start out asking for testing on everything that's coming into the US. That would be too burdensome right off the bat. And the USDA really, the rules require that testing be risk-based. We believe that large bulk shipments from these countries are high risk. The USDA agrees with us. And so we're starting out with feedstuffs as the key component in this verification process. And then this final bullet, I think you all are part of this. Like you want to make sure that there's a level playing field regarding organic integrity. Much of your material is being tested by aggregators here in the US. Let's make sure what's coming in out of the ports is also being tested. So our specific ask, I probably should have flipped these slides around. The ask is that the USDA conduct an annual report and do testing of all high-risk bulk feedstuffs. That report would include what methodologies they're using, what results they're finding, what actions they're taking on that. This is something that the program is already responsible for, and they actually already have the authority to do this within strengthening organic enforcement. However, in our conversations with the USDA, what they have said to us is that Congress giving them the specific directions on feedstuff as being high risk, bulk feedstuff imports, would help the USDA cut through the bureaucratic red tape, but help them not have to prove that they're not just being capricious. They're not just making a decision pell-mell that, we want to stop imports, because that could get into like world trade issues. And, there's a number of challenges with it. USDA kind of just randomly making that. And then they're needing to prove that it's not just random. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort for the National Organic Program. So Congress giving them this direction helps strengthen that authority and that investment in the costs of doing this. Excuse me. Repeated a slide. I think I actually deleted one of the other slides that I had on this. I think I've given you the high broad strokes of it. I'll say this about it. Senator Ricketts from Nebraska is the one who's leading this legislative effort. Our goal is to have it introduced in the new Congress with a Democratic co-sponsor. We think it has a high probability of getting into the next Farm Bill. And I guess I want to say again, this is not a silver bullet. We're going to jump into next what else USDA is doing on imports right now without this legislation. But we also are going to need to look at the marketplace and market demand in order to get prices up. It's not just about reducing imports that are fraudulent. It's about how we keep demand high. So in terms of what what else USDA is up to. We just had the National Organic Standards Board, National Organic Program fall meeting in Portland last month, October. And one of the things that the program announced was what they're calling their West Africa directive. As you might remember from that chart, West Africa was one of the places that there's a lot of soy coming from in particular. There's concern about that. And so the USDA has issued this directive to start to try to solidify compliance and require certifiers to have increased oversight of anything coming in from those countries. I will say that we had a meeting with Jenny Tucker from National Organic Program. Our Grain Council met with her a week before last, I believe, and she said that already they are seeing some operators drop out of the system because of this directive. So those are likely operators that feel like they can't comply for whatever reason. I think there's some signs of it already having an effect, even though it's only been out since the 27th of September. Again, none of this fixes everything immediately or probably as quickly as you all would like with prices as they are, but there is action being taken by the program. I do believe the program is implementing strengthening organic enforcement as quickly as they can, and it's just going to take more time to see the full impact of that law, strengthening organic enforcement law, and the new rules on import certificates and other traceability just went into effect in March of 2024. So it's going to take time for us to start to see the bad actors weeded out of the system. So, I said it, the phrase twice, no silver bullets. Rooting out fraud, whether domestic or foreign, will help, I believe, with U.S. pricing for corn and soy. There are other issues that are also at stake, and we have seen a slowing of growth in organic. We have no guarantees that we're going to get back to the double digits we used to have and that we want to return to. And so one of the things that Secretary Vilsack did, recognizing this and recognizing in particular that we had a need for stimulating organic grain production, was he rolled out this organic market development grant program in the fall of 2023, I believe. Excuse me. These grants are no longer available. The time's come and gone. There were, I believe, 93 recipients of the grants, but the focus was on organic grains, legumes, dairy, and fiber. And the project types were about developing markets, addressing infrastructure challenges, bottlenecks in infrastructure for processing, storage, transportation, and also addressing bottlenecks on farm with equipment grants. And farmers could do a grant that didn't have to have a match, up to $100,000 for bins, for new processing facilities on farm. The grants were oversubscribed. What I mean by oversubscribed is they gave a short runway when they announced this. I think you had to have your proposal in 45 or 60 days, which first you have to hear about it, then you got to develop a proposal and vet it, and you have to fill out all the paperwork with USDA and get it in. That's not a lot of time for someone who's not done a USDA grant before. We continue to advocate strongly that when there's farmer grants, they need to have a longer runway than that. That's a longer term change we need to make at USDA. But regardless, even with a short runway that was challenging, almost $300 million in requests came in. I think if it had been a longer runway, we would have seen easily, $500 million or more come in. We believe this program is an investment in domestic production and in rural economies. We believe it's needed for the ongoing growth of organic and for helping farmers overcome bottlenecks, particularly in infrastructure that is at scale for them. The economy of scale in dairy, for example. If you're processing dairy into milk cartons at a conventional scale, the volumes of milk you need are so massive that if an organic company, even a large one like Organic Valley, tried to get on one of those lines, they wouldn't have enough fluid milk to run that line for more than an hour in a day, compared to what a full 24-hour rotation would be in conventional. And so we need appropriate scale processing. That's also true for grains. We've lost so many grain mills in this country, food grade especially. And so we believe this program needs to continue, and we are advocating strongly, both through the Farm Bill, but also through and the Farm Bill extension, but also through end of year appropriations process for some continuation. We're not asking for 75, 85 million like this program was. We're saying, give us 25 million. Talk more about that in the context of Farm Bill in just a moment. But I bring this up to say we need to do both. A one-legged stool of just focusing on import fraud is important. Second leg to that stool of focusing on fraud also domestically important, because it is an issue. A third has got to be market development. And I would say actually a fourth is research. It's some of what Albert Lee is doing. It's trying to find varieties that are more competitive, that can improve our yields, especially in soy, and make us much more competitive in yields overall. Because some of what's coming in from overseas is valid organic imports, and we have to be competitive with those yields. So research, fraud prevention, and market development, including infrastructure bottleneck investment, I believe are the kind of moonshot, the collective plan to enhance domestic organic production capabilities and the price and the value of organic in the U.S. Doesn't do any good to transition a bunch of farms in the U.S. if we aren't growing. I want to transition farms. It's one of my number one priorities, but if we're not developing more market, we're just lowering price in the U.S. for farmers. All right. We can talk more about that in questions if y'all have some here, but I want to go back quickly to that NOSB meeting and talk about one other thing that came up that might be pertinent to you all in this conversation today. And that's that once again, organic seed usage has come up. As you all probably know, the program has an allowance for using conventional non-treated seed if an equivalent organic variety is not commercially available. That determination of equivalency and commercial availability has continued to be a challenge for certifiers, especially, and knowing how to enforce that with farmers. And it's sometimes a challenge for farmers to know what they must do or must not do. And I'm also going to be candid and call it out like it is. I very well know farmers who loophole that commercial equivalency piece in order to buy cheaper conventional seed, even when they can buy the organic. That's not fair to the seed sector that needs to also be rewarded for its investment in organic. We don't allow price to be a reason with fertilizer, another key living input, just like seed is a living input. Fertilizer is often a living input. And we're not saying, hey, price is allowed, if fertilizer is too expensive, you can't use it. Or you don't have to use it, you can go to conventional. Same with seed. Equivalent, if it's equivalent, price should not be an issue. That doesn't mean the price should be exorbitant. And that's part of, I think, what we are, as an organization, are trying to do is create a task force that sends the right signals. We've created this task force, sends the right signals to the marketplace, to farmers and to certifiers about how we evolve better consistency in organic seed usage such that no one is overburdened, but that there's integrity in the marketplace and clear signals to the seed industry. We will be opening up this task force a bit broader beyond our membership in 2025 after we finalize some principles of how we're all working together. But we have been getting clear signals from the National Organic Program that they are delivering a memo to the new administration saying that organic seed usage and consistency is one of their key priorities moving forward. The board itself, which is made up of farmers, brands, businesses, citizen activists, and scientist groups, have also indicated it's a priority for them to pick back up previous recommendations and discussions and try to move something forward. We are looking at it, again, a multifaceted approach, regulations and guidance, industry investment, data that's needed to help improve this, and just some consistency and clarity for all. not an easy thing to solve for. I was the founder of Organic Seed Alliance, and this was one of our first things we got involved with in 2003. And if someone would have told me 21 years later that where organic seed usage is today, I would have felt like I was a failure, because I believed that we could move the organic seed market much more quickly than this. And I just will say I'm deeply appreciative of companies like Albert Lee that have stuck with this, that continue to provide conventional non-GMO varieties, and also continue to explore and develop and test organic varieties to make things better for farmers and make the collective seed sector move forward. We have to have pillars in the movement like this who are committed to this overall integrity. And I know it's not been easy for any seed company when there is these challenges with consistency on how certifiers operate in this sphere. Albert Lee doesn't pay me to say that. I fully believe it with all my heart, and have really looked up to him in that way ever since I got involved in the seed sector. So much of what I've talked about here has intersection with what happens in a new administration, a new Congress, new appointments on the Hill. And so I want to talk a little bit about policy. I know, listen, if seed work is slow work, it takes a decade or more to sometimes develop a new variety and get it in the marketplace. Policy work is glacially slow work. It is really hard to move a big, complex government. And in particular, when you're a relatively small sector, 70 billion sounds like a lot to me. But as a $70 billion industry, we're still sometimes seen as, we're 15% of all organic produce sold in the US. We're 8% of all dairy and eggs sold in the US. We are significant, but we're still often seen as very small, in part because we're only 1% of acreage, which is a big challenge. That's why I want to convert more acreage. We have to have a good public-private partnership. That partnership needs to include a well-funded national organic program that can enforce the law, that can provide the accurate data for things like milk pricing. Like the Organic Trade Association lobbied for relief for organic dairy producers after some challenges dairy producers had in 21 and 22 with drought, feed costs being very high, a number of key challenges. And we got Congress and USDA to listen, and USDA put together a package of relief for organic dairy producers, but they put the pricing in for relief for feedstuffs at conventional prices because they simply didn't have enough data on our sector. We know that conventional prices aren't adequate in providing relief for a farmer on feedstuff costs. So data is essential. We need a well-funded program that's bringing that information in. We were happy to get 105 million in commitments from USDA for that. We felt that it was a success, but we weren't happy with the price they were paying out to our dairy producers. And that's one of those areas that people sometimes overlook. So in this current world on the Hill, I'm sure you probably all read the ag papers and see some of what's going on. We have a government that's going to run out of money on December 20th unless a continuing resolution is passed. We have a farm bill that's expired, but funding is still going on until the end of the year. At the end of the year, if we don't have an extension, things revert back to some old laws that are probably not very good for pricing for farmers. And so we're in this world in which what we call the four corners in DC, the House majority, House minority, Senate majority, Senate minority ag committee leaders are negotiating farm bill extensions. I spoke with those offices in DC week before last. I spoke with most of them over the phone this week. They are struggling with the extension. They are struggling with the extension in part because the Republican House and the Republican Senate are not on the same page in terms of priorities. And they don't have a lot of time to get there. They've got 14 days, 2 weeks from today, they need to get there. I think if you do have any direct connections with your congressional representative, an email, phone call saying we need an extension, we need it consistency as operators would be worthwhile. For organic, one of the challenges is we have some programs that are called orphan programs. And orphan programs are programs that are not mandatory authorization in a budgetary process, and they expire when a farm bill expires, even any kind of ability to appropriate. And the three programs that are key are cost share, so farmers getting the cost share funding for their certification. That expires at the end of the year if we don't get, and it would, even if they do just a baseline farm bill extension, like they said, we repeat this current farm bill, it would expire. It would be an orphan. This is what they call a plus up. We need them to specifically put in dollars for these programs. By the way, the total for these three programs is about $10 million. A rounding error in the billions they're looking at plussing up in Title I subsidies for conventional. Again, I'm not anti-conventional. I still have got family in it. Our members are split operations. We believe split operations are an important part of organic, but we're looking at tens of billions plus up for subsidy programs in Title I, and we're asking 10 million to take care of our orphans. About 8 million for cost share, $1 million for this organic data initiative that I was talking about, that also helps with enforcement. And then OCTT is the organic certification, tracking, and testing system that does even more with import certifications. Each of those are $1 million a year in funding. So if you have the willingness to call a representative, we could use your voice as heard. I'm happy to send some specific language over to Albert Lee, but the headline is, please fund organic orphan programs in the Farm Bill extension. It's very much needed. We aren't stopping there. We know that, other agricultural sectors in this Farm Bill extension are asking for much more. Not just disaster relief for farmers, which is especially needed in the Southeast, but a lot of funding for conventional corn, soy, peanuts, cotton, tens of billions they're looking for and plus up. So we're like, okay, we get it. We're not going to get tens of billions for organic, but we're asking that market development, the organic market development program, be funded at $25 million in a Farm Bill extension. We don't think that's egregious ask, given some of the sums that are being discussed in this Farm Bill extension at present. So if you're so inclined to ask for more than just our orphan programs, that's the other ask. And we would appreciate any advocacy from farmers. Goes a long way. Bringing in big businesses, you bet, it helps. But when a representative hears from a farmer, it is different. So that's my one plea to you all is, if you're so inclined, those are the asks that need to be made right now in the next 2 weeks. All right, I'll get off that for a second and move to what about this new administration? What about a new Congress, a new Ag Committee, and a new Farm Bill process? And what about a new Secretary of Ag at USDA? I don't have a whole lot of answers for you. I have some feelings about what could occur. I think there's opportunity, but there's a lot of questions. In the last Trump administration, there was the unwritten rule of it's called the 2-for-1 rule. If you want one new regulation, you got to get rid of 2 old regulations. And unfortunately, they saw organic as the same way they saw any other regulation. We worked to educate them that organic was a voluntary, not compulsory regulation, that farmers, businesses, and consumers were choosing to opt into organic or not. No one was forcing them. And as such, we needed regulatory renovation. We needed new regulations to strengthen organic enforcement on imports. Our consumers wanted stronger animal welfare rules, and the Obama administration had approved those rules. They hadn't been implemented. The Trump administration stopped the implementation of the organic livestock and poultry standards because they were new regulations. It's a really challenging position, and one that we didn't move them off of. We think we have an opportunity to help them understand that they should be embracing organic. Instead of compulsory regulations telling farmers what to do with their land or their practices, we're this option of choice. American choice, and it's an option that has value and that no one is forcing anybody into. So we'll continue to advocate there. We've got a few ears listening to us in the transition team, and we hope to get by that one. But if that persists, it does in some ways slow down some of the improvements we need to see in regulations, including things like the Organic Import Verification Act, because that would require regulatory action if it passes. The impact of tariffs and of migration policy on organic is another thing that I'm sure you all are thinking of. In some ways, tariffs in certain countries would potentially help with the price of U.S. corn and soy. But I think we have to be careful to think it's going to how much it's going to help. I think the other challenge, what we're going to see is that overall prices for organic will go up with tariffs. The domestic producers will get a higher price, but that price will get translated along the supply chain with everyone adding their little piece. And if inflation starts to peak again, and demand for organic will go down again if inflation peaks too high. And the other inflationary pressure beyond tariffs is labor. In produce, organic produce, migrant labor is essential, and conventional, it's essential. We have 2.5 million migrant laborers in this country working in agricultural production and food processing. If the cost of production at an organic slaughterhouse for broilers goes up because there isn't enough migratory labor, then the price of chicken will go up, and consumers will hit a point where they're not going to pay $14 a pound for an organic chicken breast, which is what it got to during the highest spikes in the last round of inflationary pressure. So labor is one of those issues that we need to figure out improvements on our H2A system. It's not adequate today, and it does have major impact on the farm economy. OTA has historically not gotten involved in H2A or labor issues. We plan on getting involved. It impacts our members. Our produce farmers have taken ground out of production because they can't get enough labor. It impacts our dairies. It impacts soybeans. So I've talked to a group of folks who are paying $30 an hour for soybean crews. That's a pretty high price. But if labor is short, prices are going to remain high on labor. All right. We also don't know what Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy's Doge initiative is what impact it might have. There are fears and concerns that USDA programs like National Organic Program may not receive all of the appropriations they need annually to operate. Again, as I've said multiple times, that funding is about the integrity of organic and has major implications for all of us. But we don't know. That's, I don't like to see a boogeyman under the bed. I'd like to think that it's a strong program, and the program is like $45 million, I believe, $28 million is what we're asking for next year. I'd like to imagine there's bigger waste in government and that this program actually has value for all of us. So I'd like to think it's safe. We don't know. We need new organic champions. Senator Stabenow has been a huge champion, House Majority Leader on Ag Committee, been on Ag Committee a long time. She's retired. She gave her goodbyes on the Senate floor this week, and that's gonna impact us. So we got to find new champions overall. We also lost a great Republican champion, Representative Molinaro from New York, really strong in organic dairy, didn't win re-election. Senator Tester didn't win re-election. We got to keep working on new champions, and you all are part of that. And then finally, we don't know what the impact of RFK Jr. is going to be. Some people in the organic community are celebrating it as he's going to have all kinds of positive impact. We have no clue. His picks for Secretary of Ag did not make it through. Brooke Rollins was not on his short list. So we're not sure really what the long-term implications are there. It's too early to say. If you want to keep learning more about how all of this develops, we put out a news center letter. We'll have a new website that'll make it easier to sign up for those kinds of things. We just this last week gave an update on advocacy on the Hill. You don't have to be a member to read our news center or anything else. So with that, I will thank you. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. That was very, very insightful, very enjoyable and everything. We did get one question here. If there is a time that you can talk, can you expand on the percent of food that U.S. consumers
Oh, I see the question. I got on
I'm
restaurant,
trying
restaurant consumption.
Yeah,
I don't remember the number off the top of my head. That number kind of started spiking again after COVID, of course. We don't have good data on what percentage of that food is actually organic. That's one of the things that the data companies like Spins, Nielsen, and others don't aggregate. So the only way for us to aggregate to get some sense of that is surveys with the industry, but it certainly doesn't capture all of it. We do believe that institutional consumption of organic is an incredible opportunity. There have been some interesting initiatives in school programs in California. The Vilsack administration put $15 million to a pilot on school procurement for organic dairy. We advocated for more, and we advocated that it be spread across different sectors to pilot it out. That's one of the big areas we're going to be advocating at the state level. We have a state organic network that does advocacy. Really good stuff coming out of Pennsylvania, by the way. Looking like their state's going to make some significant investments. We're giving organic an opportunity in schools. Procurement is a huge opportunity to expand the marketplace in schools, institutions, hospitals, but certainly restaurants as well. And we just don't have great data on that. I wish we did. I see somebody already asked the question about soybeans. I think, Mac, if any other comments or questions on strengthening organic enforcement imports, I welcome it. I'm really glad that we have a strong coalition across all the actors in the organic sector on this. I think we're going to get it. The fact that we have Senator Ricketts, my senator, he's never shown any interest in organic at all, and he's championing this. He sees this as a heartland issue of like making sure his farmers have a competitive, fair playing field. I think we got a really good shot at this, but we also need the Trump administration to allow the new regulation to go through. So if any of you, I'm just going to say this since I don't see any other questions, if any of you are interested in advocacy, we always welcome bringing farmers to DC. We do fly-ins. You don't have to be a member of OTA to be a part of that fly-in. If you're selling into any of our members, you're selling into grain millers, Organic Valley, Purists, that's even better because then we can connect you in that way too. But reach out. You can get my email from the crew if you don't have it already.
Yeah, and I encourage, if you don't mind, would you be willing to put your email into the comment section, and then that way people can. And then we did get one here. Is there a traceability of organic cracked corn imports as to country of origin? It seems like a ripe area for fraud.
So that's part of strengthening organic enforcement, is they should be tracing that all the way back as well. I haven't seen any data on how that's doing, but the Import Verification Act will not just be raw feedstuffs, it'll be feedstuffs in any format. So whether it's cracked corn, whether it's soy meal, it's not just on soybeans, it's any format of bulk feedstuff coming into the US. But SOE should be improving traceability on cracked corn. There was a USDA directive out of the Black Sea a few years ago that I know focused on cracked corn. One of the challenges I just also want to say on testing is that it doesn't always catch it, right? Some of these guys are sneaky, and they hold the crops in bins long enough that the half-life, the residue starts to decrease, and then they bring it into the marketplace. So that's not the only thing we're looking at. We're also looking at data. And this is where USDA's data initiative is essential. If the country of Togo is claiming to have, more hectares in organic soy than they have in conventional, or that they have really in row crop production overall, which is one of the data points we saw. We don't know if that was a data entry problem or not. That's obviously fraud. And so it's really hitting it at that certifier level, looking at kind of the mass balance of what's coming out of a country. That's going to be one of the key drivers of mitigating fraud. It's never going to be perfect. We're in a $7 billion sector, we're going to have fraud. There's fraud in every sector. If you don't think there's fraud in non-GMO verified, it's because it's a private label that doesn't have to publish public data on fraud. It happens all the time in non-GMO project verified. Organic is the only label that is by law forced to share that information when we find it. So our goal is not perfection, it's mitigation and a level playing field for farmers.
Good job. Like that. And we did get a comment here, Newhouse Dan. He is a champion of organics.
Yeah, Dan is fantastic. He was in a tight election race. Dan has been a great champion for organic, one of my favorites in Congress. You know, I'm bipartisan. I come from Nebraska, and I have to work in a bipartisan way. Newhouse, the challenge we've had is that we have heard from Republican leadership at Ag Committee is that he's not the right kind of Republican to be championing organic legislation. And what they mean by that is that he wasn't aligned on January 6th. I'm going to be candid. That is what it means. It means he has not been a strong enough Trump advocate. And so they struggle to put forth Dan Newhouse legislation in the current environment. If anybody knows me, I just call it as I see it. That's not a comment on my politics, just like that. That's the reality in organic that we're facing. We got to get more champions across all political spectrums. We need progressive liberals. We need conservative Republicans. We need Freedom Caucus. Paul Ryan, when he was Speaker of the House, said organic is something we should be celebrating as a Republican Party. He worked with the Heritage Institute, Project 2025, and said we should be celebrating organic. It is voluntary regulations on sustainability, on caring for natural resources. Won my heart over in saying that. We need all political stripes involved in this issue. Feeding America, as we all know, including the option to choose organic or not choose organic, should not be a political issue that one side owns or one side dislikes. And that's the only reason I came to OTA, is because I believe that with my full heart, and we're going to go out there and get it next year in that way.